with the Gemara and Mesechta Megillah, Daf Yud Zayin Hatzvi-Bais, close to the bottom of the page. We're going through the order of Shemona Esrei, the order of the brachas. We're in the middle of the bracha of Vilam al Shinim, and to the informers, Alti Sikva, let there be
no hope.
No hope. If you have a Artzul Gemara, we're up to 17b3, the last paragraph going into 17b4. To give a better context to this Gemara, we'll also go through a little bit of the Gemara Mesechta Brachas. We'll do that in a moment. Let's read the Gemara inside. The Kivan Shenase Din Bereshayim. Once you say the bracha of Melech Oyev Tzedakah Mishpat, or as we're saying now in Aseres Yomei Teshuvah, Melech HaMishpat, the King of Judgment. So we're speaking about Hashem judges. So you're judging the good people and you're judging the wicked people. The transgressors, those who sin, or the and Yaakov adds a word meaning, the heretics, they will be also destroyed. They will cease to exist. The koil zaydim imam, and those zaydim comes from the word zadon. Those who sin on purpose will be destroyed as well. The pasuk in Yeshaya says that this verse in Yeshaya, the Rashi says that it refers to those who do not believe that the Torah comes from heaven. And those are what's called the heretics, and they will cease to exist. The Gemara says over here that these are the Zaydim Kalu, will stop existing. The first half of the pasuk, which says, V'shever Poshim, and he will destroy those who transgress Averis, are referring to those who sin on purpose, as well as those who don't believe in Teresh Shabbat, or the second half of the pasuk. Now, this bracha originally was not an independent bracha of Shemona Esrei. Either did not exist, or was added on 500 years after the original Shemona Esrei by the Bezdin of Rabbi Gamliel, because there were many different sects right after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, Sedukim, the Baitusim, the early Christians were all oppressing the Jews in different ways. And because of that, they added on this bracha, this blessing. So let's have a look at the Gemara here in Mesechta Brachas, Daf Chavches, Daf 28.
Interesting, you call it a blessing in our case.
Right, it's like a bracha, may Hashem save us from Lazar, right?
Yeah.
So here the Gemara says, Hani Shemona Esrei Keneged Mi, corresponding to what are the 18 brachas of Shemona Esrei? And the Gemara gives several of the answers that we brought. It says, Havul Hashem in chapter 29 of Tehillim, it says 18 different times, give praise to Hashem, give praise to Hashem. Havul Hashem kavod va'oz, Havul Hashem kavod shemai. Rav Yosef says 18 times it says Hashem's name in Kriya Shema, plus one more time where it says Echad, one, which is the 19th time that it mentions Hashem. Hashem is one. And corresponding to that, with 18 blessings of Shemona Esrei plus one more blessing. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says there are 18 vertebrae in the spine beneath the ribs. So Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis have learned. Shimon HaPekuli hista Shemona Esrei brachos of Abraham Gamliel Aseder B'Yavne. Shimon HaPekuli, if you remember him, came from the town of Afula. He is the one who made the order of the 18 blessings of Shemona Esrei in front of Rabbi Gamliel, right? The son of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, one of the 10 martyrs. So his son, Rabbi Gamliel, in Yavne, this is where the seat of the Jewish Sanhedrin was. Rabbi Gamliel said to the sages, now we're talking about a time of immense persecution. We just had 10 martyrs being killed. Rabbi Akiva was killed. Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Jews are suffering from internal and external. He told them, Klum yesh adam she'edei l'taken birchas aminim, who would like to make a bracha, a blessing, for the heretics, a blessing directed against the Tzedukim, the Sadducees. Is there anyone who knows how to institute such a bracha? Now, to institute a bracha, we're talking about you need a Navi, a prophet, to make a bracha that every Jew should say. It's not so simple. You need a Navi. Is there anyone of that caliber who could do it? Ahmad Shmuel Katan V'tikna. So Shmuel Katan, he was he himself quite a famous personality, very poor, very humble, but he was the greatest of the Torah scholars at that point. He was the one who they would go to with any questions about when the new month should be, the new sun, the new moon. At this point, they did not yet have a fixed calendar, and they would come to Shmuel Katan for any questions. So V'tikna, he instituted such a bracha. They would take rotations. But who would lead the prayers? Who would be the chazan? Now the next year, Shmuel Katan, although he proposed this bracha, he's the one who instituted it, he forgot it. And he was chazan, and he forgot the bracha. And he's trying to figure it out, and he's thinking about it, and thinking about it. For 2 or 3 hours. He's a chazan. Imagine a chazan taking 2 or 3 hours being stuck on one bracha. Not like Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, when he would faint, during davening. And famous story about the Kohen Avad Vadin, who would say on Rosh Hashanah, Hashem acquires the servants in judgment. He'd faint when he said it, and he woke up and he told them what happened in heaven, how he's having a whole argument in the Bezdin Shamayla, in the heavenly court, in favor of the Jews. He was stuck for 2 or 3 hours. Usually, the halacha is that when someone is stuck in davening, a chazan is stuck, so you give him a little bit of time, up to the time it takes to finish the rest of the prayer, and then you take him away. And then you have to replace him. The reason is because maybe Shem Minus Nizar Kabay. Perhaps they are a secret heretic, a secret denier. And maybe they don't want to say the words, they don't want to believe it, the words of davening. Perhaps they believe in 2 gods, or for whatever reason, but perhaps they are secretly a kafir, a heretic. So why did they not replace him? Why did they not remove him? If someone makes a mistake in one of the chazan makes a mistake in one of the prayers, one of the brachas, you don't remove him because he might have made a mistake. If you made a mistake in this bracha of may the heretics have no hope, then you remove him. Because we're worried perhaps this person is secretly a heretic. And that is why you remove him, because he doesn't want to say a bracha blessing against the heretics. The Gemara answers, Shani Shmuel Katan, the EU Tikna. Shmuel Katan is different because he is the one who instituted the bracha, and therefore there's no suspicion of him that he will not believe in the blessing. So if he got stuck, it's because he didn't, because he forgot the words. Gemara asks the question, maybe perhaps Shmuel Katan went sour. Maybe he was a tzaddik in the beginning when he instituted the blessing, but now when he's stuck, it's because he became a heretic, a secret heretic, and he doesn't want to say the bracha anymore. The Gemara answers, Amar Abaya says, Gemidi tava laheva bisha. We learned that a person who is a tzaddik cannot become evil, cannot become wicked. Really? Gemara says, V'loi? You're telling me someone who's a tzaddik can't become wicked? Vaksiv is written in a verse of Shuv tzaddik mitzkasev avel that the righteous one will do tshuva from his sins. So the Gemara answers, Ahu Rasha Meikare. That's talking about someone who was once evil, and then he became a tzaddik. So then he can never trust himself. Tzaddik Meikare loy. Someone who's always been righteous his entire life? No. Then you could you could assume he'll always stay a tzaddik. So you could assume Shmuel Katan was a tzaddik.
Isn't there, I don't remember the name, a Kohen Gadol who in his last year did every Avera?
That's exactly what the Gemara was saying. You must have learned this Gemara once.
I heard the story.
That's the Gemara is going to ask about that. Exactly. You must have learned this Gemara.
Is Yochanan Kohen Gadol?
Yochanan Kohen Gadol. That's right. So the Gemara asked, "V'loi, is that really possible?" But now we learned Al Tamin Atzbach B'Yin Mosach. It says in Pirkei Avos, don't trust yourself until the day you die. You can never trust yourself. Like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said before he passed away, I see two pathways. One going to Gan Eden, one going to the opposite of Gan Eden. I don't know which way they're taking me. And it brings a proof. Yochanan the high priest, he was a high priest in the Beis Hamikdash for 80 years.
He was also a king or prince actually I'm actually from the
Exactly.
So maybe actually it's like you could detect actually that since he was actually or sometimes at odds actually with rabbis because he was having his policy of conquering and everything. So maybe we could suspect that somewhere along the line he was going to get fed up and maybe go over there.
Very good. All right. Very good. It looks like you also got a head start here.
Yeah.
So he was a Kohen Gadol for 80 years. Ubesoif nasa tzedukah, and he became a tzedukah, I mean, one who only believes in the written Torah. Now, could you imagine the Kohen Gadol, even in the second Beis Hamikdash, if he was a sinner of any sort, when they would walk into the Kodesh Kodashim, Holy of Holies, they would die on Yom Kippur. As a matter of fact, they used to have a long chain tied to their foot, and in case they would die, they could pull them out. In the second Beis Hamikdash, there was every single year a new Kohen Gadol for many, many years. In the last period from the Roman conquest of Eretz Yisrael, there was like, I don't know, a huge amount, 20, 30, 40 Kohen Gadol within a span of 120 years or so.
That's a lot.
Because every year they would, the Kohen Gadol, they would buy their position, they would buy it from the Roman procurator of Eretz Yisrael. And then they would die that year on Yom Kippur. And there were many, many Kohen Gadol, one after the next. You had to be a tzaddik gomer, a complete tzaddik, to walk into the Kodesh Kodashim and come out alive. And can you imagine Yochanan Kohen Gadol? And for 80 years, he's a Kohen Gadol. And then after 80 years, he becomes a tzedukah. He becomes a scoffer. It's like a woman who went to shul every day for her whole life, and now she's 95 on her deathbed. She asks a priest to come. Just in case, right? The good old famous Yiddish joke. Just in case. So the Gemara answers. Amar Abaye answers. Who Yanai? Who Yochanan? Yanai, King Yanai, the famous King Yanai, who was the evil king, you could say. He was a despotic king. He killed many, many Torah scholars.
He was also from the Chashmonai.
He was from the Chashmonai dynasty, and he is actually Yochanan Kohen Gadol, Yochanan the high priest. So although the kings are supposed to be from Shevet Yehuda, the tribe of Yehuda, but here the kings were actually from Shevet Levi. They were Kohanim because they were grandchildren of the Chashmonayim, the Matisyahu, Yochanan, and Kohen Gadol, the great family of Chashmonayim, the ones who fought the Greeks and kicked the Greeks out of Eretz Yisrael with the miracle of Hanukkah. Yanai, he was from the family of the Chashmonayim. He was a Kohen. So he was a king and a Kohen Gadol. He was both. Yanai, although we speak about him, how evil he was, on the other hand, we do have in the Gemara stories about Yanai, and there's Mamarim and Sichos explaining the conversations Yanai had with his wife. Right? Shloimit. What's better? The sister Shimon ben Shatach, right? Imri Yadi Gadiyah, is sheep better or goats better? And they asked, and they want to know what's better. And he explains it according to halacha, according to Kabbalah. These are very deep conversations that they were having. So he wasn't a simple person, King Yanai. Although he was very wicked, he wasn't such a simple personality either. So he was a Kohen Gadol for 80 years. And being that he came from the family of Chashmonayim, and as a young child who was educated in the ways of the Chashmonai family, which had a very favorable attitude towards the Tzedukim, toward the Sadducees, So therefore, he continued the family tradition. So he was merely going back to what he was taught to as a child. So therefore, you can't bring a proof from Yochanan, Kohen Gadol, that he was a Kohen Gadol for 80 years and then became a heretic. Can't bring a proof from him because he went back to merely what he was taught as a child. You see how important it is. You can say a little child, what's a big deal? It's just a movie. It's just a comic character. But every little thing that happens to a child could have a huge effect. Even you see someone as great as Yochanan Kohen Gadol, right? 80 years, the greatest tzaddik of the Jewish people, and at the end of his life, he went back to what he was taught as a little child, and became someone who denied Torah Shabbat, denied Hashem, denied Torah Shabbat. Rava says, Yanai l'chud v'yechanan l'chud, Yanai Rasha mikare v'yechanan tzaddik mikare hanichel Abaya l'Rava kasha. So that's according to Abaya. Rava says that there were actually two separate people. Yanai was a wicked king. Yochanan was a tzaddik in the beginning, and he became, at the end of his life, a evil person, a tzadduki. Amalach Rava says, tzaddik meikare nami dilma hadarbe. Rava says that it's possible, even someone who's a tzaddik for their entire life could veer from the right path, as it happened with Yochanan the high priest. How come they did not remove Shmuel HaKatan when he was saying, when he got stuck in the bracha and the blessing of Lamalshinim? And it says the Gemara, Shiny Shmuel HaKatan the Aschil Beis. Shmuel HaKatan is different because he began the blessing, but he got stuck in the middle, couldn't finish it. So they did not suspect him that maybe he was a min, maybe he was a heretic.
If someone, God forbid, gets sick in the middle of repeating the Shemona Esrei,
Yeah,
and as he passes out, it has to be replaced,
yeah.
does the person who replaced him start where he?
Oh, very good question.
Or at the beginning?
The person who replaces him starts right. If someone chasen has to be removed in the middle of, then they replace him from where they're up to. I only had such an experience once. There was a Bakari who was reading the Torah, and he's a type of Bakari who reads in several shuls, one after the next. And it was a hot summer day, so it must have been his fourth or fifth time laning the Torah that day. And in the middle of one of the aliyahs, he didn't faint, but he passed out. He had to stop laning. So someone else took over, but they continued from the pasuk he left off. So I never had that exact experience. So that is about the bracha of Vilamalshinin, and to the scoffers, let there be no hope. Now, originally, it seems, we brought from the Yalkut Shimoni yesterday, about how Haman told Achashverosh the Jewish people are saying this bracha, they're praying that we should die, we should be removed. And this bracha was around long before. So it seems to say that originally these two brachas were together in Shemona Esrei. The bracha of V'la Malshinim, and for let there be no hope for informers. And the next blessing, Ala Tzadikim, Ala Chasidim, for the righteous. These two blessings were one long bracha together. And we say a special bracha over here for Al-Gedei HaTzedek, for the converts, the righteous converts. Well, later on, they became separated into two separate brachas. And who was the one who was able to separate it into two separate blessings? Rabbi Gamliel saw that it's coming to a point now. We have so many troubles from within, from without. Well, we need to separate it. And Shmuel HaKatan was the one who went and separated these into two brachas. So he didn't per se add new text to Shemona Esrei, rather he separated the text of Shemona Esrei. There's a story told during the Holocaust. Hans Frank, familiar with him? He was a governor of the general government. The general government was what Hitler, what he called Poland. When he occupied Poland, first the first half and the second half, he called the general government, and the governor he put in charge was named Hans Frank, a terrible, terrible anti-Semite. And he was trying to do everything he could. He was in terrible. He was eventually killed during the Nuremberg trials. Hans
yes.
Frank. He was eventually himself executed, but he tried outdoing himself to prove himself to Hitler, because Hitler looked down at all the Polish people, even if they were loyal to him. You know, he looked down at them as second class, inferior, half Slavs, you know, all those stuff. And so he did his best to prove himself how loyal he is, and he was unfortunately extremely brutal and terrible, and the persecution that was done to the Jews under his direction. And one time he had a meeting with Hitler, and at this meeting he tells him about all the things he did. This is right after they made a whole a certain area of Poland, how they cleared it out from Jews. And he says how we took he tells we put them into ghettos, and we cleared the ghettos, we stole their property, we this, we that. And he's saying all the persecutions, all the terrible things that he did to the Jews. And Hitler's listening and listening, not reacting. And finally he says, we made a Jewish police force, in the ghettos. The Jewish police were unfortunately, in many, many respects, in many, many ghettos, worse than the German police, unfortunately. Should only speak good about the Jews, can't blame most of them, but for the things that were done. But in many places, they knew Yiddish, and they knew where the Jews would hide, and they understood the Jewish mentality, what they would do initial, and et cetera, things like that. And they found Jews, they thought they were going to save their own skin. And the vast majority of places, after they finished clearing out the Jews or arresting Jews, and thousands of stories, thousands of anecdotes about the Jewish police. Some of them led their own parents to be deported and all that. The vast majority of them were killed. There was one ghetto where they escaped also, but they were eventually tracked down and killed also. But he tells Hitler, I made a Jewish police force. As soon as Hitler said that, he got up and he had a big smile on his face, and he gave him a slap on the back and says, great job, Hans, great job. To persecutions from the outside, they're terrible, they're insufferable, but they're all from the outside. From the inside, from among us, that is much more painful, much, much more painful, even if it won't be as bad, but it's much, much more painful. And those are some of the people. The word Zaydim can mean those who sin on purpose, but Zaydim also are those, you could say, are the evil ones among the Jews. And that's who they were having in mind when they said this bracha. You could say the kapos, or those type of people of the Jewish nation. Now, at the end of the entire Shemoneh Esrei, what do we say after the whole Shemoneh Esrei is over? Yu l'ratzon imrei fi v'hegin libi lefunecha Hashem tzuri v'goyali. Right? That's how many brachas are there in Shemoneh Esrei?
18 or 19.
18 or 19, right?
Yeah.
Now, the reason why we say Yu l'ratzon imrei fi, may the sayings of my mouth be accepted by Hashem, is because at the end of chapter 18 of Tehillim he says Yu l'ratzon, at the end of chapter 19 of Tehillim, let's go next, chapter 19 of Tehillim. At the end of chapter 19 of Tehillim, what's the last words? You see on this, Yu l'ratzon imrei fi v'hegin libi lefunecha Hashem tzuri v'goyali. May the sayings of my mouth, meditations of my heart be acceptable before you, Hashem, my rock, my redeemer. So the end of chapter 19 of Tehillim is the words, may the sayings of my lips have been acceptable before you, Hashem. So it's very fitting at the end of the 19 brachas of Shemoneh Esrei, we say that pasuk as well. Let's go back to the Gemara here in Mesechta Brachas. And if you look at
close to the beginning of the Shemoneh Esrei,
what?
I say it's very
Close.
close to
Hashem sefasai tiftach. If you go to Mesechta Brachas, Daf Tes Amud Beis 9b, the Gemara says these words over here. Why do we say Yu l'ratzon imrei fi? And the Gemara says, because because at the end of 18 chapters of Tehillim, David HaMelech says, "Yil ratzin mifri." May my lips, may my words of my mouth be acceptable before you, Hashem. So ask the Gemara over here, why didn't you say it in the beginning? So he says, because David HaMelech said it after 18 chapters of Tehillim. The Gemara asked the question, it's at the end of chapter 19 of Tehillim, not at the end of chapter 18. So Gemara answers, Gemara asks, Hani Shmeina Esrei, Shasrei Havyan. There are 19 chapters before the verse Yil ratzin mifri, not 18 chapters. The Gemara says, Ashrei Ish v'lam rak shugayim chad parshahu. The first two chapters of Tehillim of Ashrei Ish, praiseworthy is a man who goes in the ways of Hashem. And the next chapter, Lam rak shugayim, why are the nations in uproar? And talks about how the nations and the evil ones have no reason to show off and they will be destroyed eventually. In the beginning, it was 2 chapters. Later on, in the beginning, it was 1 chapter. Later on, it became 2 chapters. Now, the first chapter of Tehillim, Tehillim chapter 1, talks about tzaddikim, righteous people, holy people. Ashrei Ha'ish, praised as a man who does not go in the ways of the wicked. Ki im b'soras Hashem cheftzoi, his desire is a law of Hashem. He meditates, he learns Torah day and night. The first chapter, Yedei Hashem derech tzaddikim, Hashem knows the ways of the righteous. The second chapter of Tehillim is Lama rakshu goyim umim yagurik. Why have the nations gathered and kingdoms do things in vain? And it speaks about the evil ones. Hashem will destroy them. In the beginning, there were 2 chapters. There was 1 chapter. Later on, it got divided into 2 different chapters of Tehillim. So if the 2 chapters are together, it's after 18 chapters of Tehillim. It says Yil ratzin mifri. If they're separate, then it's after 19 chapters of Tehillim. In a similar sense, the brachas and Shemona Esrei, these 2 brachas of Malshinim, and for the evil ones, for the informers, and then Al HaTzaddikim, Al HaChasidim, and then for the righteous and the holy and the good converts, in the beginning, they were 1 bracha, similar to chapter 1 and chapter 2 of Tehillim. Later on, they were separated into 2 brachas. 1 bracha for the evildoers, and 1 bracha requesting to Hashem protect the tzaddikim. In a similar sense, chapter 1 and 2 of Tehillim, where in the 1 chapter is about the tzaddikim, the righteous, and the other chapter is about the evil, the other 2. So when Shmuel Katan composed the bracha of Lamashinim, not necessarily did he compose a new bracha, rather he divided the 2 blessings, divided the 1 long blessing into 2 brachas into 2 blessings, and merely he was getting stuck where to say it, where to say where to put in the words Baruch Atah Hashem. Now, just to conclude with one thing that it says in Hayom Yom, to some deeper meaning in davening, is a comma after the word Semager. Says, may the evil kingdom, Hera, speedily, Se'aker, Se'shaber, Semager, should be crushed, uprooted, and destroyed. Then you're supposed to make a short pause. Then Mesechnia and subdue. Now, Dovi, according to Chassidus, how many klippas are there? 3. Sholosh klippas atmayas.
Okay.
Just like you have Chesed, Bina, Chesed, Gvura Tiferes, or Chachma, Bina, Das. In Kedusha, you have it in klippa. You have 3 main klippa. And then you have a 4th level of klippa, which is called klippas noga, which is not, it's just potential to be good or bad, right? Let's say anything physical, say this bottle, this can of seltzer. If you say a brach on it and you learn with it, with the power, strength you get from it, so then it becomes good. If you eat it without a bracha, and then you take the power you had, the strength you have, and do a sin with it, do something wrong, and it goes into klippa. It becomes something negative, right? So it's called klippas noga. A piece of non-kosher food can never become holy, can never be uplifted to holiness. There's strong exceptions to the rule, but that's exception rather than the norm. Let's say someone, to save a life, on Yom Kippur, someone who's sick and has to eat, right? So in that case, that's an exception to the rule where they could elevate that to kedusha, to holiness also. Or the other exception is, of course, about tshuva. Someone who sinned and they do teshuvah, they elevate with them. We learned in Kunter Semayan, any godliness that they brought into klipa, into impurity, they bring it to kedusha. The three klipas, when Mashiach comes, it says will be destroyed. Right? Like Mr. Shapiro asked that it's better to elevate them. I guess you elevate whatever you could elevate, but whatever you can't, you can't. But klipa snoiga is a klipa which has the ability to be good or bad. You don't need to destroy, per se. All you need to do is to sechnia, to subdue it. And that is, so in this bracha, we have three adjectives. May the evil kingdom be destroyed, crushed, and subdued. Those are the shalosh klipas atmeis, the three impure klipas. You make a short pause, and then you say v'sachnia, and may it be subdued. Because klipas noida does not have to be destroyed. Rather, what we need to do is only to subdue it, to use out only all the good potential and to take away all of the bad potential that there is in there.
Also, if I'm not mistaken, evil doesn't have a separate existence.
Correct?
It's like a balloon. And as soon as you take away the energy, it itself dissipates.
Right.
And so there's nothing to be, in a sense, destroyed because it doesn't have, mamashas to begin with.
Right.
You know.
I'm saying
So what I'm saying is
peace doesn't have darkness. It's like you're saying it's a lack of light.
So that's why you can't be elevated because there's nothing there. It only exists to serve its purpose, to oppose Yiddishkeit. But once it's the brachas are, or that energy is taken away, then it just collapses.
Right. It says when the world was created, all the letters of the Aleph-Beis came in front of Hashem and said, let the Torah start with me. Let creation start with me. And Hashem chose the letter Beis. And the first letter of the Torah is Bereshis, is a base in the Bereshis in the beginning. And Aleph says, what about me? I'm the first letter. Hashem says, don't worry. You will be the first letter of the Seres HaDibros, the 10 Commandments. Now, this is not just a nice story, which is in Chazal, because this story is actually an introduction of the Zohar. So we're talking about the secrets of the Torah, and the first time they're being written down. And this story is an introduction. And it's a very, very deep story. So Aleph, the letter Aleph, comes from the word Alefka Chachma Alefka Bina. Idea of Keser, Keser, which is the crown of Hashem, above spheres, above intellect, and above knowledge. Base comes from the word Bina, knowledge and understanding. The idea of bias, the letter base makes the word bias a house, which is two sides and a roof, shows that you have a certain framework. Keser, a crown, is above a framework. Hashem did not create the world with an Aleph, with Keser. Because the greatness of Hashem, from Keser, you cannot create it. Rather, Hashem created the world with a base, a bias, a house. Things have to be settled and put into a certain framework. If you have a very great king, so you have a king and he lives in and he's in his throne room and the ceilings are 250 feet high and you have steeples on top. So if there's a spider on top of a 250-foot roof, it's not going to bother the king. That's why it says spiders hang out in the king's palace, because the roof there is so high that no one bothers them all the way up there. But if you're in your own house, especially if your wife is home, and if you see a spider in the house, right, she tells you, get rid of the spider, and if you don't do it fast enough, it's me or the spider. So make your choice, right?
Oh, I love spiders. Okay, you leave.
So from the level of Keser, in the king's crown, if somebody sins, a spider that's not going to bother them, because it's so great that it doesn't take up any space, any head space, so to speak. When Hashem created the world, in order for a world to exist and for there to be such a thing, that something that could bother Hashem like a sin, he had to create it with the letter base. And the only problem is, when you have such a thing, you can have such a thing called klippa, things which go against Hashem. If you have a king who's very, very rich, and he's collecting taxes every day, billions of dollars, billions in taxes. If somebody goes and steals from his treasury, I don't know, $100, it's not going to make a dent in the king. It's not going to make him more rich, not going to make him more poor. So you might say, let him not put any guards in front of his treasuries, because it doesn't make a difference if people steal. No, of course, he's going to put judges and he's going to put policemen and going to put guards to make sure nobody steals. Since he's so great and he wants to run a country, he has to, and therefore he has to be able to have people to guard his treasuries. Even if he loses money, it's not going to bother him. Still, he has people in order to help him run his country. Right? So Hashem by himself is exalted, is great, but he cares about the small details. So during the bracha, we say, may all the enemies of your people forever be cut off. So the word yikaresu, what does the word yikaresu means cut off? Rearrange the letters yikaresu, chaf resh saf, what do you get? Kares, right? Kares, which is, I'm trying to charge the phone, trying to charge the computer. Kares is the same letters as the word keser, crown. Meaning from the level of keser, you're able to have, klipa could exist. You're able to have things opposite godliness, opposite holiness. We're asking Hashem, yikaresu, all the enemies of the people, including the klipa, cut them off, yikaresu, but cut them off from keser, from the level of keser as well. Because from the level of keser, that's where klipa could receive, those who transgress Hashem's ways could also receive chayas. As we learned this at great length in Kunter Samayan, 2 ways that klipa receives chayas. One of them was from keser, right? And there's kavanas, which are brought down in different sidurim, that when you say Hashem's name, Baruch Atah Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, you're supposed to have in mind Hashem, Yud with the kamatz, Hey with the kamatz, Vav with the kamatz, Hey with the kamatz. Kamatz means kometz, close. Komotz picha, right? What does that mean, Yossi? Close your mouth, right? Komotz. So with the kamatz, to tell you to close and to shut down all the life, all the chayas that goes to klipa. We say this is hinted to also in Az Yasher. Az Yasher, we say, Ashir el Hashem, I will praise Hashem, ki ga'oi ga'a. He's very, very great. He's so great that he threw a chariot and its rider into the sea. Is that the greatness of Hashem? That he drowned the chariot together with the riders in the sea? So the explanation, according to Chassidus, is Ga'a means high, Ga'a exceedingly high. That's going on the greatness of Hashem. From the greatness of Hashem, from the level of Keser, you're able to have klipa, you're able to have an existence which could go against Hashem. In the king's palace, you could have a spider. And this greatness is what causes eventually, this is what the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians, they subjugated the Jews thinking they could receive from the level of Keser. But that ended up being also the downfall, because Ga'ai is great. Ga'i Ga'ah, the greatness of the great, meaning the Keser of the Keser, the essence of Hashem, Hashem will always choose the Jews. It happened by Purim, it happened over there in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. So therefore, because Hashem is so great, he was able to destroy the Egyptians. So this is a bracha that we ask. Hashem, shoiver oivel machniya zaydim. You destroy the enemies and you humble the wicked. And having in mind Yud Kei Vav Kei with the kamatz underneath, which we don't have to do it if you don't have in mind the kavanas of Kabbalah. But those like Dovi you have in mind, the kavanas of Kabbalah, I'm sure for them it's elementary. But the idea of closing off and taking away any chayas, any life to klipa. And so this is a very important bracha, which takes place, and it's understood why this bracha was instituted right after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, because until then we had Hashem was openly running when the Beis Hamikdash was there. We had godliness in the world, and therefore, if someone sinned, they died at an early age, at the age of 50 or 60. Afterwards, the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, suddenly klipa, the powers of klipa have much more strength, show their strength much more. And when that happened, then they instituted this bracha that Hashem should destroy all the klipa. We'll just conclude with a short, another point in the sikha which we're up to. Maybe tomorrow we'll complete it. If you have the English copies of the sikhas, if you'll be on page on page 7, we brought 3 different reasons why teshuvah is not necessarily considered to be a mitzvah. One is that it's an all-encompassing type of mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah which is a specific thing, meaning if you sin, there's a process of teshuvah, but it's not really a mitzvah of teshuvah. The process is saying vidoy. That was the first explanation, sort of like if you divorce, here's how you divorce. The second explanation we brought down was that teshuvah is a mitzvah klali. It's a general encompassing mitzvah. It doesn't really have details. All right, so first opinion, Michas Chinuch, that it's not a mitzvah at all. Second opinion, that it's an encompassing mitzvah. And the third opinion is that it's saying vidoy, confession is 2 parts of one mitzvah. Part of the mitzvah is returning to Hashem, part of them is confessing. So there's questions and back and forth, and according to halacha, he says the third explanation makes the most sense. The Rambam, from the words of the Rambam, it seems like there is an obligation to do teshuvah. One sins, you should do teshuvah. So it seems like there is an obligation to do teshuvah. And there are 2 parts of teshuvah: leaving the sin and deciding not to do it again. And so there's different aspects of teshuvah. However, in this sikha, the Rebbe will give a tremendous, beautiful explanation about the idea of teshuvah, sort of what happens many times in Chassidus, saying how the entire outlook of what a mitzvah is, what teshuvah is completely different. For example, if your screen on your phone is cracked, you go to the repair shop. I want to get it fixed. How much will they charge you? I don't know, $120, let's say, right? In Pittsburgh, they charge you $180. Why? Because you're in Pittsburgh, right? So what happens if you go to somebody and the guy works in the factory in Shenzhen in China, and he says, "Oh, I have everything you need. You need a new screen? I have cases, I have boxes of it. There, a new screen. You need a new camera? Here, I'll replace your camera for you. Whatever you need." That's what Shuvah is. Shuvah is that I missed doing a chance to do a mitzvah, or I did a sin and I made a problem, but I'm going to the source. I'm going to where everything comes from. And they're saying, you need anything? Everything you need is over here, and we'll fix it for you. So that is the idea of teshuvah. And in the person, it's also a similar idea. If a person is sick, let's say, God forbid, in one of their limbs, imagine you could go to a place, a guy who's, he has his nerves are hurting, he has a nerve pinch and it really hurts him. So he could go to a doctor and get physical therapy and take medicine and take a few weeks or months to recuperate. Imagine you could go to a place and says, "Oh, your nerve is hurting you? No problem. Here's a new nerve. Everything will be fine. Now you're good to go." Right? That's exactly what the teshuvah is, because teshuvah, there's 365 negative mitzvahs, 248 positive mitzvahs corresponding to the limbs of the body. And when a person sins, they cut off one mitzvah, they harm a limb. When they do teshuvah, they're renewing that limb. They're getting a new part of their body, and they're bringing a new life. That's exactly what teshuvah is. Teshuvah is merely fixing and bringing a new life to what was there before. And according to that, we're going to explain why teshuvah is so great, why it's not counted to be a mitzvah per se. It's because teshuvah is such a great mitzvah. You're going back to the source. Every mitzvah is a detail. But teshuvah is not a specific detail. When you're renewing the entire body, renewing the entire person, it's a general mitzvah, or it's something which can't be defined in one specific detail. Right. So we'll stop for here today. Thank you.